The Dallas afternoon sun was a real scorcher, baking down on the busy streets. You could see the heat shimmering off those glass skyscrapers, and the sidewalks were hot enough to fry an egg. In the middle of all those rushing business folks and tourists who weren't paying attention, there was this little kid named Caleb. He was holding onto a beat-up basket full of candies wrapped up nice and neat. He couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and he looked too small to be carrying such a heavy load. Caleb had one simple, but kinda sad, job to do. He needed to sell enough candy to get medicine for his mom, Emily. She was real sick, and she just kept getting worse. She was stuck in bed in their tiny little apartment. Even though she told him to stay home, Caleb wouldn't listen. He felt like it was his responsibility, even though he was just a kid. What Caleb and Emily didn't know was that this day was going to be a game changer. On that hot street corner, Caleb was going to run into Nathan Brooks, a guy whose life was about to take a pretty wild turn. The streets of Dallas were doing their usual thing, horns honking, people rushing around, and street vendors yelling out their deals. Caleb was standing there at Main and Elm, his sneakers worn down so much you could almost see his toes. He was holding tight to that old basket of candy bars. Sweat was dripping down his face, but he was laser-focused on the people walking by. "Candy, mister? Just a buck." Caleb called out to a guy in a fancy suit. He sounded strong, even though he'd been turned down a bunch already. The guy didn't even slow down, just waved Caleb away while he kept talking on his phone. Caleb sighed, and that basket felt heavier than ever. The world just kept spinning around him. Business people were checking their watches, couples were walking by sipping iced coffees, and kids were laughing and running around like they didn't have a care in the world. Something Caleb couldn't really do right now. He walked over to a woman in high heels. Her perfume smelled nice for a second, mixing with the dusty city air. "Candy, ma'am?" he asked, his voice sounding a little hopeful. She barely even looked at him, and she held her purse tighter like he was going to snatch it or something. Caleb didn't let it get to him. He stood up straighter and looked back at the never-ending crowd. Every dollar he made was going to one thing: getting the medicine his mom needed so badly. Back in their little apartment on the edge of town, Emily was lying on this lumpy old mattress pushed up against the wall. The room was kind of dark and smelled like damp plaster, and the broken ceiling fan was just barely moving. She coughed hard, and it shook her whole body, leaving her gasping for air. She put a shaky hand on her chest, hoping the pain would go away. Emily had begged Caleb not to go out today. It killed her to see him having to do so much, but he was stubborn. "I'll be back soon, Mama. You rest, okay?" Caleb had whispered before kissing her on the forehead and heading out with his basket of candy. As the hours passed, Caleb's feet were starting to really ache, and I've tried to capture the essence of the story while making it sound like a regular guy is telling it. I've also kept an eye on the YouTube rules and made sure everything is clean and easy for an AI to read. Ready for the next part. His stomach was starting to rumble pretty loud, but he just ignored it. He was staying focused. He saw a bunch of kids playing over in the park, laughing and having a good time. For a second, Caleb just stood there, watching them and thinking about how carefree they looked. But then he snapped out of it and grabbed the basket tighter. He didn't have time for games. By the time the sun started going down, painting the sky all orange and pink, Caleb had barely made enough to scrape together a few crumpled bills. His feet were covered in blisters, and his whole body ached, but he kept walking toward home, holding on to the idea of how relieved his mom would be when he gave her the money. When Caleb opened the apartment door, he could see his mom still lying on the mattress in the dim light. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. "Did you sell much today, sweetheart?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb knelt down next to her and pulled out the few crumpled bills and coins. "Enough to get your medicine tomorrow," he said, forcing a smile. He tried to hide the blisters on his heels and forget about all the people who turned him down. Emily's shaky hand reached up and touched his cheek. Her eyes were shining with a mix of pride and guilt. "You're so strong," she mumbled. "Stronger than I'll ever be." Suddenly, Emily's chest tightened up, and her breathing got even worse. Her hand slipped off Caleb's cheek and fell onto the mattress. "Mom." Caleb's voice cracked with panic. His little hands were trembling as he gently shook her. Tears started welling up in his eyes as he whispered, "Please wake up." Emily didn't answer. Without wasting a second, Caleb grabbed an empty water bottle and ran out the door, his little feet pounding on the sidewalk. "Help! Someone please help!" he screamed, his voice cutting through all the city noise. Finally, a kind stranger stopped and ran over to Caleb. After hearing what was going on, they helped him call an ambulance and stayed with him until the paramedics showed up. Caleb held onto Emily's frail hand as they lifted her into the ambulance. He was shaking like a leaf. The hospital was cold and sterile, a real contrast to the humid Dallas streets. Caleb followed the paramedics as they wheeled Emily into the emergency room. At the front desk, a nurse just handed him a clipboard. "Fill this out and wait," she said, without even looking at him. Caleb's hands fumbled with the pen. His small fingers could barely hold it. The medical forms were confusing, all the words blurring together as tears welled up in his eyes. When a doctor finally came out, he didn't look too happy when he saw Emily's worn clothes and Caleb's candy-stained shirt. "We'll need payment up front for any tests," the doctor said bluntly, handing Caleb a paper with a crazy high price scribbled on it. "I'll get the money," Caleb said, holding his candy box tighter. His voice was steady, but his heart was breaking. As the streetlights came on, shining down on the Dallas evening, Caleb stood outside the hospital with his candy box. He walked through the crowds of people. "Ready for the next part when you are. I'm making sure to keep it real, conversational, and YouTube-friendly." His voice was all worn out, but he wasn't giving up. "Candy, just $1, he called out, but you could really hear how tired he was. Across the street, this guy, Nathan Brooks, walked out of a fancy office building. He loosened his tie and let out a big sigh. It had been a long day, and he was carrying all the stress from those meetings like it was glued to his back. His shiny shoes clicked on the sidewalk as he reached into his pocket. He saw he had a missed call from someone, but he didn't feel like calling them back right then. As he was crossing the street, he saw Caleb. Something about the way the kid was standing there, kind of beat down, but still trying, caught his eye. Nathan stopped and watched as Caleb went up to a woman and held out a candy bar that looked like it had been through a lot. "Just $1, ma'am," Caleb said. The woman just shook her head and walked off real fast, and Caleb's shoulders slumped a little. Nathan felt curious, and without even thinking about it, he walked closer. "Hey, kid," he called out. Caleb turned around, his big brown eyes looking all tired and hopeful at the same time. "You want some candy?" "Just $1, he said quickly, holding up the squished chocolate bar. Nathan looked him over for a minute, noticing the dirt on his face and the worn-out sneakers. "What are you doing out here so late?" he asked, his voice sounding softer than he meant it to. Caleb hesitated, shifting his weight. "Selling candy?" he answered, holding the box tight. "For my mom. She's sick, and she's at the hospital now." Nathan felt something tighten up in his chest when he heard that. "Your mom's in there?" he asked, nodding toward the hospital. Caleb nodded fast, his voice getting quiet. "I need money for her medicine. They said I have to pay first." Something about the kid's voice, like a mix of being desperate and not giving up, really got to Nathan. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a bunch of bills. "How much for all of it?" he asked. Caleb's eyes went wide. "All of it," he repeated, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Nathan nodded and handed him the money. Caleb fumbled with the candy bars, practically shoving them into Nathan's hands. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice shaking with relief. "Hold on," Nathan said, looking toward the hospital. "Take me to your mom." Caleb froze, not sure if he could trust this stranger. But Nathan looked him straight in the eye, and after a minute, Caleb nodded. "Okay." As they walked toward the hospital, Nathan kept looking down at Caleb. There was something strong about the kid, a quiet strength that reminded Nathan of himself when he was younger. As the hospital doors slid open, Nathan knew this wasn't just some random good deed. This was something he couldn't just walk away from. The hospital smell hit Nathan as he followed Caleb through the doors. The kid was holding onto the strap of his candy box tight, and his eyes were darting around the busy emergency room. "She's over there," Caleb said softly, pointing to a part of a room that was closed off with curtains. When they got to the bed, Dan, ready for the next piece whenever you're ready. I'm making sure it sounds like a regular American guy telling the story and keeping it clean for YouTube. Aiel's eyes went to Emily. Her face was pale, she was breathing real shallow, and her hands looked so fragile, clutching that thin hospital blanket. She kind of stirred when she heard Caleb's voice, and her eyes fluttered open. "Mom," Caleb said gently, climbing up onto the chair next to her. "This is Mr. Nathan. He bought all my candy, and he came to help." Emily's eyes moved over to Nathan, and the second they looked at each other, something felt different in the room. Her face got all tense, and she gripped the blanket tighter like she was getting ready for something bad. Nathan frowned, looking at her closely. She looked familiar, but he couldn't figure out where he knew her from. "Do I know you?" he asked carefully, his voice quiet. Emily started to say something, but no words came out. All of a sudden, she was flooded with memories, ones she hadn't asked for. A rainy night 6 years ago, a man looking all messed up walking into a hotel lobby, and this quick connection that she never forgot. She never thought she'd see him again. "It's nothing," Emily mumbled, her voice shaking. She turned to Caleb, pushing a strand of hair off his forehead. "Did you sell a lot today, sweetheart?" Nathan's eyes narrowed a little, that feeling of knowing her bugging him. "Wait," he said, his voice sounding more sure of himself. "I do know you, don't I?" Emily hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. She couldn't hide it anymore. "That night, 6 years ago," she started, her voice barely loud enough to hear. "At the hotel, I didn't know how to find you after. And then, Caleb." Nathan's heart dropped as her voice trailed off. He looked at Caleb, and all of a sudden he could really see it. The kid looked just like him. The eyes, the way he set his jaw. "What are you saying?" Nathan asked, but he already knew the answer. Emily looked him in the eye, her voice steady even though she looked scared. "Caleb is your son." Those words hung in the air, heavy as lead. Nathan froze, his mind trying to catch up with what he just heard. How can you be sure?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I wouldn't tell you this if I wasn't 100% sure," Emily said firmly. Nathan let out a sharp breath and ran a hand through his hair. "I'll need to confirm it," he said, his voice tight. Emily nodded, looking defeated. "Do what you need to do." Nathan sat in the hospital waiting room, holding the DNA test results in his hand. The words on the envelope, "paternity test results," felt heavier than they should. He asked for the test real calm, but now that the truth was right there, his hands were shaking a little. Taking a deep breath, he ripped open the envelope and read through it. The results were clear. Caleb was his son. Nathan leaned back in the hard hospital chair, letting out a breath like he was carrying the weight of the world. He was feeling relief, guilt, and disbelief all mixed up. 6 years, a whole lifetime for a kid that he had missed. He thought about Caleb's strong smile, Emily's being so weak, and all the sacrifices she must have made. A few minutes later, Nathan went back to Emily's hospital room. "Okay, I'm all set for the next section," keeping the tone conversational and clean. She was sitting up in bed with a bunch of pillows behind her, looking real tired, but she still looked at him like she meant business. Caleb was sitting next to her, drawing on a piece of paper with crayons. "You've seen the results," Emily said softly, looking right at him. Nathan nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "He's my son." Emily's face softened a little, but you could still see the worry lines. "I told you because you deserve to know," she said. "But more than that, Caleb needs someone who can give him what I can't anymore." Nathan knelt down next to the bed and looked her in the eye. "I should have been there," he admitted, sounding really sorry. "For you, for him. But I'm here now, and I'm not walking away." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she managed a small smile. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. Caleb looked up from his drawing, looking curious. "What's going on?" he asked. Nathan reached out and put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "It means I'm not going anywhere, kid," he said, sounding warm and friendly. "From now on, I'm here for both of you." Nathan was really determined to help Caleb and Emily, but it wasn't easy. Just a few days after the DNA test proved he was Caleb's dad, Jenna, his sometimes girlfriend, started noticing things were different. She got suspicious because he was always gone and because he was so serious all of a sudden instead of being his usual charming self. One night, Jenna cornered Nathan in his living room. "You've been acting weird, Nathan," she said, sounding fake worried. "Where are you running off to all the time?" Nathan hesitated. He knew this was coming. "I've got responsibilities now," he said simply, not looking her in the eye. "Responsibilities?" Jenna scoffed, crossing her arms. "Don't tell me this is about that kid and his mother. You can't seriously think this is your problem." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Caleb isn't just some kid, he's my son," he said firmly. Jenna's face went blank for a second, but then she got angry. "You're gonna throw everything away for them? What about us?" "There is no us, Jenna," Nathan said, his voice calm but sure. "Whatever we had, it's been gone for a long time. I just didn't see it until now." Jenna's lips twisted into a mean smile. "You're making a mistake, Nathan. You don't even know what you're getting yourself into with them." "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said. "I'm giving my son a chance at the life he deserves, and I'm not going to let anyone stop me." What Nathan didn't know was that Jenna wasn't going to give up that easy. She was jealous and desperate, so she contacted Dr. Langston, the doctor who was taking care of Emily. He wasn't the most honest guy, and she talked him into changing Emily's treatment a little bit, just enough to keep her from getting better. But Nathan's gut told him something was wrong when he saw that Emily was getting worse even though she was doing what she was supposed to. After cornering Dr. Langston one night, Nathan found out the truth. "Britt, ready for the next section whenever you are. Keeping it real and clean." "And he pressured me," the doctor admitted, looking ashamed. "She paid me to slow things down. I didn't think it would hurt her too much." Nathan was burning with anger. "You put someone's life at risk for money? You're going to pay for this," he growled. That same night, Nathan went to see Jenna and broke up with her for good. "Stay out of my life, Jenna," he said coldly. "You've done enough damage." With Jenna gone, Nathan put all his energy back into taking care of Emily and Caleb. He promised himself he would protect them no matter what. The hospital room was quiet, with the morning sun shining through the blinds. Emily was sitting up in bed, looking better. Her face was still pale, but you could see some color coming back that hadn't been there in weeks. She was breathing easier too. Caleb was sitting next to her, swinging his legs and holding up a new drawing. "Look, Mom, it's us. Me, you, and Mr. Nathan." Emily smiled weakly, looking at the drawing with all the bright colors. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said softly, then looked at Nathan, who was standing by the window. Nathan walked over to the bed, looking warm but thoughtful. "He's got talent," he said, crouching down next to Caleb. "But I think he made my hair too gray." Caleb giggled. "That's how it looks." It was a nice, happy moment after everything they had been through. Nathan looked at Emily, his voice getting softer. "The doctors say you're getting better. It'll take time, but you're getting stronger." Emily nodded, but she still looked a little unsure. "It's because of you," she admitted. "I wouldn't have made it this far without your help. And Caleb, he's happier than I've seen him in years." Nathan put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "He's an amazing kid, but this isn't just about helping. It's about making things right. I wasn't there before, Emily, but I'm here now for both of you." Tears came to Emily's eyes, but this time they were happy tears. She reached out and put her hand on Nathan's. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, while Caleb was asleep in Emily's hospital room, Nathan sat quietly by the window. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a real purpose. It wasn't about business or being successful, it was about family. They weren't a perfect family, and they had a long way to go, but it was their family. They were building something new together, based on love, trust, and hope. And for Emily, Caleb, and Nathan, this was just the beginning. The day Emily got to leave the hospital was warm and sunny, a nice change from all the hard times they had been through. Nathan was standing outside the hospital, his fancy car parked close by, ready to take Emily and Caleb to his house. Caleb held Emily's hand tight as they walked towards Nathan. "Mom, do you feel better now?" he asked, looking at her face like he was trying to make sure she was okay. Emily smiled a little, her voice soft but steady. "Much better, sweetheart. thanks to you and Mr. Nathan. Nathan opened the car door and helped Emily into the passenger seat. Caleb was excited and jumped into the back. "It's not far," Nathan told her, sounding friendly. "You'll have everything you need, and it'll be easier for me to help take care of you both." When they got to Nathan's house, Emily was amazed. The house was big, but it felt cozy, with lots of sunlight and simple decorations that made it feel warm. Caleb was looking around with wide eyes, checking out the tall ceilings and the backyard you could see through the glass doors. "This is more than I ever expected," Emily said quietly. Nathan smiled. "It's not about the house," he said. "It's about giving you both a place where you can get better and feel safe. You're family now." Over the next few weeks, Nathan worked hard to get to know Emily and Caleb. He found out what Caleb liked to read and which superheroes he thought were cool. They played games, read stories, and worked on Caleb's art projects together. Nathan also spent time talking with Emily, listening to her stories about her life, the tough times she went through, the happy moments, and what she hoped for Caleb. One evening, they were all sitting in the living room after dinner, and Caleb looked up at Nathan, a little shy. "Can I call you Dad?" he asked softly. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. He knelt down next to Caleb, his voice steady but full of feeling. "You can call me whatever you want, Caleb. But if Dad feels right to you, then I'd be really happy." Caleb grinned and gave Nathan a big hug. "Thanks, Dad." From that moment on, they were really a family. Emily watched with tears in her eyes, feeling so grateful. As the months went by, their little family got stronger and closer. The house was filled with laughter, and every day they made new memories filled with love and connection. For Emily, Caleb, and Nathan, the sadness from the past was finally gone, replaced with the promise of a happy future, together as a family.